Trudy. We gave this a talk last month, specifically on data centers, to kind of give people an awareness level that may be more than what you've gotten in the newspapers or somewhere on the internet over the last 6 months or more, although it's been ongoing for years now, and just sort of reaching a crescendo with this mad rush to build more of them in a hurry, regardless of the consequences on the environment or in people's lives. Some background for me. Trudy mentioned that I'm an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been involved in designing, constructing, operating any kind of buildings, anything from residence halls to biotechnology buildings to the famous MPAC Center that's up on the hill in Troy, to doing some other things. I worked in public works here for the Town of Bethlehem also because I wanted to do something different for a while, which was an eye-opening experience. And I taught at RPI for about 20 years in the architecture school for courses on sustainable building design and climate change, which, interestingly enough, when that first started, nobody was talking about it. But I taught a class about building systems, and the first lecture was about climate change. And all the students there just sat there in a room of 70 students. The room was totally crowded in January, and we talked for 2 hours straight, or I did. And at the end of the 2 hours, I figured they'd, like any college student, they get up and they're going to run off, go to the next class, or go to lunch. No one left. About 2 minutes of silence, and then finally the hands started to go up. And they were asking me, why aren't we learning about this? And I said, well, I thought you were. The dean told me that we were kind of sprinkling it through the curriculum. And all I was just shaking head, no. So I looked at the students, it's now 10 after 12, and I said, well, I know you all have to leave, so if you're really interested in this, you should go talk to the dean. They left. 10 minutes later, I'm in my office, and the dean calls me. He says, Oliver, he's from Scotland, he has that wonderful Scottish accent, and he said, I have these students who are demanding a course in climate change in buildings. And I said, well, that would be wonderful. We've been talking about this for a year. And he said, well, would you be willing to do so? And you know, you have to take that pause that lasts about 3 seconds because you know you're going to say yes or no. And I said, yes. And then he said, well, I said, give me a little time to get a syllabus together and get a book and kind of, we can do it next fall. And there's silence on the phone. He says, no, how about now? He said, these students really want this course. And so another very short microsecond pause on my part, and I said, yeah, you find me a classroom and I will teach this course. And we did that for over 20 years. So these students that are out there now working have been doing it for a long period of time. And those ones initially in those first couple classes are the ones who are out there leading the way for green building design and sustainability all over the world, which really is remarkable because I keep track of them, what they're doing, and I'm really impressed with their work, to say the least. So that's kind of who I am. I'm kind of like an instigator sometimes, and it works sometimes. So today we're going to talk about these data centers and what's their impact on climate change? I mean, it's just these little things. You talk about, well, it's energy, or it's water, or it's the site, or it's stormwater, or it's farmland, or something. Well, it all backs up into major issues we want to dive into. And so with that, I'll get started. And the conversation tonight is, first of all, we'll talk about the changing climate. And so one of the things I ever do when I give some kind of a talk in the area around the state, around the country, has been, I give a talk on, is there a low carbon diet in your future? And so this kind of derived from some of that. The changing climate, greenhouse gases, and how it's associated with all the carbon that you can ever find anywhere, and what's called a new carbon diet, and then finally, what are the culprits? Here or there. Your computer. What happened? Projector's on.
Is it on
take that down. What is the greenhouse effect? You all know what the greenhouse effect is? Anybody not know? Just raise your hand. I know, you know. It's this thin layer above the Earth that surrounds the Earth that really traps all these kind of wonderful things, carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, methane, etc., that are up there that form this layer. And so a lot of this energy in the form of radiant heat gets reflected back into the Earth, gradually warming it over hundreds of years, since the coal era, actually. And if you don't believe me, here's the carbon dioxide levels as they've gradually risen up. And interestingly enough, somewhere around 1990, I was working on indoor air quality problems in buildings and associated with carbon dioxide in buildings, because we humans breathe off a lot of carbon dioxide. And if you don't have good ventilation systems in your building, carbon dioxide levels go way up. So I had this meter that I bought that would measure carbon dioxide. But in order to calibrate that meter, you had to take it outdoors and set it to whatever ambient conditions were in the atmosphere. And at that point, it was 350 parts per million. Well, as the years went by, and I would do it again and do it again, I would take the instrument outside and I'd turn it on, warm it up, and it would read 370 or 380 parts per million. And I'm going, well, there's something wrong with the instrument. I called the manufacturer and they said, haven't you heard about CO2 levels rising in the environment? And I go, well, yeah. And boing, it hit me. That's what's happening in my meter. It's actually reading correctly. So here we go. It just keeps going up. And we're up to about 426 parts per million or so right now, and climbing. And along with that carbon dioxide level rising over the years, up into the 40s, we were actually kind of below average. But if you look at the trend line, it just keeps going up and up and up. And some of you who have been reading the newspapers or have been recently to other parts of the world, it's been getting really warm over there. Records being sent everywhere. France was over 100 degrees. I'm a fan of the Tour de France, which is ongoing in Paris and the other parts of France right now. They are racing in 100-degree temperatures. And they're really not happy about it. It's really difficult, especially when you're riding 100 miles and climbing 18,000 feet or something. So all over Europe, Spain, it's getting much warmer. Even here in the US, we're seeing it. So what's this all about? Well, it's about carbon. It's about carbon. Carbon is in all the fossil fuels. Sorry. It's in all plant life, right? Simple, get around. CO2 is emitted by the combustion of every one of these fossil fuels, whether it be gasoline, fuel oil, natural gas, etc. Methane, which is natural gas, is another source of it. And methane also comes from another place. It's tied into food. Our landfills. We throw so much of our food into a landfill, and it breaks down and it forms methane. So when you drive by the Albany landfill and you go, oh, that really does smell, that's the methane. And they are significant contributors to climate change. Coal, yet one more of those fossil fuels. Anybody been to these two locations? Been there at that time of the year? When in those two locations, Beijing was the worst one for a while. It's gotten better there. Over 600 parts per million of particulates. People were complaining here last week when we had the fires coming over from Canada and the levels here in Albany were somewhere around 160, 170. Kind of felt uncomfortable, stinging in the eyes, etc. Imagine being 700. That's what's going on over there at certain times of the year. They still use an enormous amount of coal in India and in China. And here's the problem. We could stop tomorrow. All right, no more fossil fuels. Let's just stop. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Right? It would be a wonderful thing. But the problem is, this carbon lingers in the atmosphere for an extended period of time. The tracking that they have done says when you put carbon dioxide or methane into the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide takes at least 11 years before it starts to dissipate from that upper layer in the atmosphere. Methane is even longer in terms of its breakdown times. So we should have stopped 20 years ago. Here we are, still fighting with certain people about maybe we should change. I bet you didn't know this one. This is one of my class slides. We are 4.5% of the world's population. We use 34% of the world's energy. 1/3 for 4% of the people. We're some of the culprits. Maybe not specifically, because some of you, I guess, really do try. Here's one that can kind of, we can play with the data, we can make it look good, we can make it look good. Well, if you look at the lines, India's the green, look at them, they're way down here. The blue one is China, they're down there, and the US, oh yeah, we're right up at the top. But this is megawatt hours per person. There's only 330 million people here. So when you multiply 330 million by 15, yeah, it's a number. But now take China or India at 1.3 billion people and multiply it by 3 or 5 or 6. They are also significant contributors. They don't get away with this. So how do you play with the data? You make it look good or you make it look bad, right? But you got to analyze it. So what is this carbon diet? What are we doing? Are we doing the right things? Have we been doing them? We reduce, the 3 R's. We reuse. We recycle. We're good people. But it's not enough. What are the missing links? Well, I mentioned food. We throw a lot of food away, both either personally or from restaurants or in the agricultural sector. Buildings are a contributor. I taught sustainable buildings for 30 years. Saving energy, not only just in terms of energy, but what are the things that go into buildings? What are the things that go into all the products that we buy? Everything has carbon in it. Everything used carbon either as energy or in the material itself to manufacture it and ship it around the world. When I was working on one major project and the architect said to me, and this was not an architect who was interested in sustainability, he wanted to select some tile to put in all the bathrooms in this 200,000 square foot building. And it was going to be this wonderful, beautiful Italian tile. It was dramatic. It was beautiful. But it had to come all the way from Italy, put it on a ship, and bring it all the way over here. When I said, why don't we just go to Olean, New York, and talk to the company there and have them manufacture something that looks similar to that you would find acceptable? How much less carbon is involved in doing something like that? When a ton of tile to ship it. Other stories about architects wanting to pick something that came from Germany. I'm like, can't we find it in the US? And the answer is yes, you can, but you have to ask for it. What are our energy sources? Where does the energy come from? The US is a supplier of oil. But some of our oil actually comes from Saudi Arabia. Some of it comes from Mexico. How does it get here on a ship? What kind of energy does those ships use? It uses fossil fuel to bring it here. The transportation sector, well, it was kind of obvious. The cars we drive, the trucks that people deliver stuff in, all of it's burning fossil fuels. We're sort of changing, this electric vehicle thing. It was coming, we had a lot of momentum going, and then somebody said, no, we don't want to do those anymore. No incentives. And then finally, the new culprit, data centers. They are the unseen target that we're now looking at. The last thing is, and it just ties into the last slide, everything requires energy to produce it, either to ship it to somewhere or make it. So consumer goods, most all consumer goods we have today have some kind of plastic in them. What's the plastic made from? Natural gas. Millions and millions of cubic feet of natural gas used, which is why now we find all this natural gas that we have here in the U.S. being shipped to other parts of the world because they need it for their manufacturing facilities, like in places like Indonesia and everywhere else, to manufacture cheap plastic goods. The vehicles, all the cars we have, all the interiors in the cars, they're all plastic. You might have leather seats, but everything else is plastic. Some kind of polymer product. And by the way, when you buy a new car, anybody here bought a new car? Wonderful. I got a couple people to pick on. When you buy that new car, you go into the showroom and it's wonderful. You get in there and they close the door and it's like being in a cocoon. And then you take a big smell. Oh, that lovely new car smell. It's wonderful. What is it? It's plastics, polymers that are vaporizing and depositing themselves. That film you see in a new car after about a month on the inside of the windshield, you go, oh, yuck. That's all that stuff. Off-gassing from the plastics that you're using. Buildings, all the stuff that's in here. Plastics. Polymer products, carpet, the chairs, plastic, ceiling tiles, you name it. It's got something in it that's off-gassing in our buildings and in our cars. It's not healthy. Food, we talked about that. And now, computer chips. Do you know what it takes to make a computer chip? Those little tiny things. There's one in here. Little tiny computer chip. Well, when I first went to work at RPI, they were constructing this brand new building called the Center for Industrial Innovation. And what that has is one 3-story section at the south end of the building that's a clean room facility, which is where they research and manufacture computer chips. And the energy and the water that it takes to make computer chips is mind-blowing. It's unreal. And the water that they use can't be the tap water that you normally would drink from. That is highly purified water that has 1 particle maybe per cubic liter, which is almost pure H2O. It cost, 20 years ago, it cost $5 a gallon to make it. I don't know what it costs right now. That's how filtered it is. And we use thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons. If you were to look at the Global Foundry factory up there in Saratoga County, the amount of water that they use is unreal. And the energy that they use in terms of electricity is unreal. And what happens to those chips? Well, they're good in this new industry of data centers for about 3 years. All the ones that they've manufactured have been outdated by this company called NVIDIA, who's the big player. And they are now selling a new one because they're listening about using too much air and water and everything to cool these buildings, which are huge hot boxes. They're now putting these cooling jackets around all these computer chips so they can take all the heat away and throw it away into the environment. But that means all those chips that they used 3 years ago, they're throwing them away. And the next generation, which will happen less than another 3 years, they'll probably throw them away. So all this e-waste we're accumulating now, it's got to go somewhere. Let's talk about the power. power from fossil fuel plants, whether it's oil, natural gas, or coal, they are only 35% efficient. 35%, which says 65% of the energy of that fuel source is thrown away as thermal pollution. So if you in fact could save a kilowatt hour, you're actually saving 3 kilowatt hours because those plants are so inefficient. Where does your energy come from? Anybody here have solar panels? Oh, a couple people, wonderful. More of us should do it, we're trying, right? Sorry. So, but there are people that say this is what we should be doing. Drill, baby, drill, isn't that the motto? Or, you know, here, and now we've got the fossil fuel industry saying, oh no, we shouldn't be putting these on prime agricultural land. We shouldn't do this. Well, most of them are not prime agricultural land. They've been land that was farmed for 50 years and there's no nutrients left in it other than the ones from the nitrogen that was put there and the phosphorus that's coming from somewhere else. And oh, by the way, you know where nitrogen comes from? It's made from ammonia, which is made from natural gas. And to kind of wrap up this climate section, we've been having some problems with climate change. I don't have one of the most recent ones because the federal government decided to take down all the data that was up there. I have to go back to the archives to find the new ones. But in 2021, these are kind of the ones that they were tracking. 20 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. And it's done nothing but get worse in the last 4 to 5 years. I threw this slide in because last time I was here, somebody asked me about cryptocurrency. That was one of the big things a couple of years ago we were all jumping up and down about. They were using a lot of energy, they were using a lot of water, etc. They still are. We don't hear too much about this lately. I think they've built them out to the extent they were going to, and now we've just sort of moved on to data centers. But it's still there, and they are a culprit that we need to contend with. The data centers, on the other hand, pick part of the curve you like. You think it's going to be at 6.7%, or is it going to be 12% growth rates? We don't know. I do know that there are so many active sites under consideration that we need to be mindful of what's going on. And it's not just the electricity to run the chips. Anybody ever been in a data center? Okay, well that's not to be expected. RPI has 2. And one of them, I ended up having to do a lot of work with them over the years. It's in the basement of a church, believe it or not. Kind of an odd thing. But that particular one, every once in a while we would lose the power. Now that building has a UPS, which is an uninterruptible power system. It has generators because we don't want the power to go off the computers that are in there and all those server racks, right? It's critical. But on top of that is the air conditioning system that has to keep that room sort of cool, like 74 degrees. Well, one night, the air conditioning system failed. And I got a call about midnight that we had a disaster in our hands because in 20 minutes they were going to have to shut the whole computer room down because it was going to overheat to 130 degrees in 20 minutes. Fortunately, we managed to get the thing back on. One of the mechanics was on duty that night. But that's the kind of problem we have with those buildings. They are huge heat sources, which is why they have to cool those rooms. And this is like your refrigerator. You know, you want to keep food cold in your refrigerator? It does that. But it also blows a lot of heat out at the bottom or the back. That's how air conditioning and refrigeration systems work. Something gets cold, something else has to get hot. Oh, and at least approximately 50% of the power in any data center is going to cool the room. That's how much heat is in there. And I want to specifically talk about like 180 watt megawatt center, and you kind of know there's one looming in the Albany area. Oh, sorry, thank you. So they're, when they're at 180 megawatts or even at 100 megawatts, they're usually large scale, what they call hyperscale or AI-driven facilities. They're meant to work on high density, what we call GPUs, which are graphic processing units, not the kind of little things we have on our phones. They use an enormous amount of power. There are agents where we have access to cooling, water typically, cheap energy, and robust fiber optic connections. That's what they're looking for. And cheap land. Now here's the trade-off. We can do this with these buildings, these rooms, these mammoth rooms, one of two ways. The traditional way has been to use what we call evaporative cooling. Anybody here ever grew up in the South? No. Well, we used to have these things down in the South that were called evaporative coolers because it was so dry that you could put water in a pan and blow air over it, and it would actually make you feel cooler in the summertime down there. I lived in Texas, and that's what I used. Well, that's what we use, but these things are huge, and they're big cooling towers, and you see these plumes coming out of them at the data centers or at a generating facility, because remember, 70% of that heat's got to get thrown away, and typically how they use technology to do it is through these evaporative cooling. So it's high water, lower energy. Well, the data center people have been taking a real beating over this, using all this billions of gallons of water, drinking water. So what we're doing is going to this low water, high energy source, where we use this liquid cooling in a closed loop, and it sounds wonderful, right? There's very little that happens with this, just in a closed loop, and every once in a while they got to put some chemicals in it, and then every once in a while they got to throw some of that water away with those chemicals in it, and it goes to the sewer system. I don't know what's in it lately. But they use a lot more electricity to accomplish this goal. A lot more. So this direct or indirect kind of a thing. And it's a trade-off. And the numbers that the industry is using is something like 1.8 liters per kilowatt hour to manage the heat if you're using evaporative. And if you do indirect, yeah, but it's a lot more electricity. So how do you want to play the game? That's what it's coming down to. And they're taking such a beating over using all this water, they're going to use more electricity. And they're going to use these very sophisticated server racks with all these computer chip things in them to accomplish this. It's going to cost them a lot more money. So some of these people are saying, no, I don't want to do that. I want to use the cheaper method, just use a lot of water. Got to ask a lot of questions when we start looking at them, each one of them. So here's a picture of one. Look at all this plumbing inside a data center. That sound like a really smart idea? All this water or all these computer chips in there? There's been a couple of instances where they sprung a leak. Oh my goodness. What a problem. Google. They're big on data centers. They're getting bigger and bigger. Their electricity demand jumped 37% in 2025 last year. 37%. And they have a huge number of them. Their greenhouse gas emissions went up. And they were the big one that says, oh, we're going to be sustainable. We're going to use nothing but renewable energy. We're not going to use any water. Well, now that they're in a pickle, guess what they're doing? What everybody else does. Water consumption went up 10.9 billion gallons. 10.9 billion. The average person in this room uses 110 gallons of water a day. You multiply it by 365, that's still pretty insignificant. Meta, another one. The Facebook people. Indirect water use in 2024, which last year I could get it, was 19 billion gallons of water, drinking water. More than 20 times its direct use. The direct uses it just for the cooling, but with Meta using all these gas turbine units down there in Memphis, Tennessee, 39 gas turbine generating units because they can't get enough power from the grid. All the water that cools those gas turbine units, the steam turbine units, is what we call indirect usage because it's not used in the data center specifically, but it's used to cool the turbines that make the power to run the data center. So when you look at the total environmental footprint, it's huge. One of my favorite slides. So Google and all the others, they're all now doing this. Oh, we're wonderful. We're doing the right things. We're being sustainable in so many ways. Well, when they start to throw that out there, it's kind of what we call greenwashing. Everybody heard of that term? It's been around for quite a long time now. It started out with buildings and products that we would put in there. But then I like this one because it was the cooling towers associated with a generating plant. Paint them green, everything's good, right? Well, how many data centers are there in the capital region? Anybody know? You think we need another one? There are 19. And none of them have names that you would recognize unless you work there. There's some right in Albany, there's some in Clifton Park.
Does the city,
You write it down for me, thank you, please. So there's 19 with 8 different providers, so there's some providers that own 2 or 3 data centers in the region already. Now these are not 100 megawatt data centers. These might be what we call edge data centers. They serve the local, regional businesses. Your phone storage might be on there. If you have a website, it might be hosted there. Company my son had, they hosted in downtown Albany with a server room right there on South Pearl Street. So they're out there. So let's look at the one that has become really of interest. Kenwood Commons, located at the old Stewart facility on 9W, just between Albany City line and the Town of Bethlehem border. This slide came from the proposal that they shared with the City of Albany about a month ago, and some unnamed source who's going to remain nameless shared this with me. I'm going to read this. This is right from their proposal. Responsible energy and environmental design. Oh, that warms my heart. No on-site generation. Zero impact on air quality. Designed with full awareness of the surrounding environmental justice zone. And Isaac will touch on that a little more here in a bit. Waste heat recovery. They're going to take all the heat that comes off this 500,000 square foot data center and reuse it in the buildings that they haven't built. And maybe never will. Closed loop system. You can source all the heat to somewhere else. Even in the middle of summer, I suppose, they're going to make the building 120, right? Optimal cooling climate. Does Albany have an optimal cooling climate? Sure, it does in the middle of winter. renewable energy integration. Solar on the hillside to meet solar 2030 goals. Well, I'm going to show you some facts. And then finally, low natural disaster risk, well below the national average. Well, yeah, we're a couple hundred feet above the Hudson River. We're not in a flood zone. Big deal. The data center has a proposal of 500,000 square feet. That's kind of hard to imagine, but I'll show you a picture of something similar. With a load of 180 megawatts, which is really big. All the supplies got to come from off-site, so they say, and there is a couple of gas turbine units in the area. One of them, well, actually, all of them use water cooling for the turbines. So they're using a lot of water. So the site can say, oh, we're not using any water, but it's being used elsewhere to support the electricity, all that electricity going to the data center. It's substantial. The remaining buildings, another 700,000 or 800,000 square feet, if they were to build them, would probably only consume about 5 megawatts. The whole RPI campus, all our buildings, 4.5 million square feet, only use 10 megawatts. 10. And I thought that was a lot. Their proposal describes it what they call an edge data center, which is meant to support local and regional needs. But all the edge data centers that are constructed in the US currently range from 5 megawatts to 20 megawatts. So the question is, what's the real intent of a facility using 180 megawatts? What are they going to do? It's not an edge, it's not local. There's already 19 data centers locally supplying what we need. It's going to require power backup. I talked about the RPI one. Power can't go out. Everything goes away if power goes out, right? Bingo. You know, look at your laptop, all of a sudden it blinks, no power. What do? Oh my God. The generators that they could use, and they say they're not going to, and I don't believe them, are usually about 1 megawatt each in size, which are big diesel generators. In addition, what they have said, if they're truly not going to have any generators, they've got to have an enormous battery backup system. Because the way this stuff works is this. All this electrical power comes in, and it doesn't go to the computers. It goes to a battery system, which then takes that battery power, AC to DC, and then out of the battery system to DC to AC, and then runs it in the computer chip environment. So the batteries always have energy in them, which means the computer servers never go down. Never. Unless everything fails. But the batteries are only designed to last maybe 20 or 30 minutes, assuming the generators are going to come on, and then back it up if you can't get the power restored in 20 minutes. That's how it works. So they're going to need generators. Most of them would be diesel powered, and they're big. So there's storage, there's emissions, water, and noise associated with it. And there's a lot of noise. The cooling requirements. For 180 megawatts, I assumed a third would have to be for cooling. Now you're going to use either evaporative cooling in the large water use like we talked about, or you're going to use this closed loop cooling as an alternative, but then using a lot more electricity to go with it. So if you go to this alternative with closed loops, you now have to use a unit like this. And this is, if you look at data center pictures, this is what you see on the roof. Hundreds of them for these big centers. This one is only capable of providing 2 megawatts of cooling. 2 megawatts. It's 52 feet long, 9.5 feet by 10 feet high. And let's see, 2, and let's see, I need what, 60? Did I say 60 megawatts? So I need what, 30 of these things in order to cool that room? And they use a lot of electricity, and they make a lot of noise. this demand is going to challenge the grid, like every other one that's coming at us these days. And it turns out in reading through some of the things I found that they're actually looking to get some subsidies. Oh, where's that subsidy coming from? Us. Someone's got to pay for it. Oh, and I talked about this waste heat thing, right? They say they're just going to heat all the buildings. Well, the way I see it, I think they've only got enough money to build a data center. Were they, they couldn't get anybody to build anything over there before. Nobody was interested. So let's build a data center and I get some money. And if we build a data center, maybe we can build some technology things, and then that'll be okay. We could use the waste heat there, maybe. But what if they do it, but it takes 5 years to get there? What do they do for 5 years with all the waste heat? Maybe they never get there. I don't know. But if it's discharged to the local environment, we're creating what we call a thermal heat zone. It's going to be warmer there. Just what the community that's down the hill and around the area that doesn't have much air conditioning needs, right? In the summertime. Renewable energy. This one really got me. They say, solar on the hillside. Well, I looked at what it would take, and it's about 5 acres to get a megawatt of power. They only have 75. They're going to use a bunch of it for buildings and roadways, and there's a bunch of wetland, and some of it's too steep to build anything on. They got a whole bunch of trees down if they want to do that, so it's not likely. So I guess maybe 10 to 15 acres, so maybe they could do 3 megawatts of power. But then I find out they're not really going to do that. They're only going to put it on top of a couple buildings. They might get half a megawatt, which is clearly not enough to do much of anything for their site. Additional concerns. This is a new one. All those big battery backup systems, they're now lithium ion. All these battery storage things, they're being propped up all over the country, which in some ways are a really interesting idea because they are going to be necessary to support the grid in the summer months when the load gets too high. It's already being done in California and Arizona. Significant. But if they put a big 30 megawatt battery system in, what has been happening is, in one data center already, there's been a fire. Caused about $50 million in damage. And the fire department had a hell of a time putting it out. So I'm looking at it going, they're going to build a fire station over there just to support this thing. And then there's this. Another friend of mine actually went on this tour that the developer offered a week or so ago to walk on the site. And he took a picture, and this is one of the 2 still standing existing buildings that they actually would like to use for part of the data center. This one and the one next to it are 50,000 square foot each. And they're multi-story. And they want to put a data center inside this thing. Well, I'm not a true structural engineer, but I've done enough of the work to be able to tell you that that floor system in there will not support 250 to 400 pounds per square foot, which is what they need for a data center. So what are they going to do? Well, they'll say, well, it won't work, we're going to have to tear it down. So much for the historic preservation talk. And then, so how big is this thing? Has anybody been in the impact facility? Fairly big, isn't it? Well, it's 220,000 square feet. I know. I built it. I was there for the design. This data center is twice as big as that. Twice as big. This thing's 7 stories tall and it's built into the hillside, kind of like what you'd think over at Kenwood. And then finally, zoning. Currently, that site is not zoned for a data center. So it's going to need approval from the Albany Planning Board, Albany City Planning Board, and the Common Council. Now, they're kind of schmoozing those people over there, saying, gee, we're really talking to the neighborhood. They've given a presentation to the community around the Kenwood Commons site, saying, we're going to do these wonderful things for you. We're going to build a daycare center. We may put a grocery store in. We may hire some of you as a cleaner, I don't know. But it's not zoned for it. And so there's, it's just zoning, right? Well, look at all the impacts we've just talked about if you were to allow this on this site, and that need to be managed in some way or another. And, this is an economically disadvantaged zone. So they're out there trying to sell this to them, how wonderful it's going to be. It's going to create jobs, how it's going to build a daycare center. Wonderful things, right? And New York State was the legislature passed a moratorium, a one-year moratorium. But the governor didn't like that. So she has given this executive order. Says, well, we got a one-year moratorium. Okay, same thing. Well, the executive order has language that mimics the Kenwood proposal. In that language of the EO, if you were to read it, talks about a daycare, child care center. Where would that have come from? The developer. Talk to the governor's office, in my opinion. Because there are other things in that executive order that are straight out of that Kenwood proposal from the developer. Similar in nature. Here's a piece of the executive order. Developing a community investment framework. Assist communities assessing the economic benefits. Oh, economic benefits. Let's talk about economic. Should we talk about mitigating negative impacts? Yeah, I would think. Transparency. Frameworks to provide a seat at the table for labor. Creation of a community investment fund. Operators provide use for energy affordability efforts, enhancement to public services, such as child care, K-12, public infrastructure, there it is. Where'd that all come from? And now this. There's an exclusion in the executive order. Because the developer's proposal talked about, we're going to help the universities and the hospitals. We're going to provide data services to them. So the executive order says those things are not subject to this executive order, so go ahead and build it. If you're under 50 megawatts. Go ahead. See no evil. So there are difficulties with this. It's not a done deal. And lastly, a little bit of humor after I've given you all this stuff at the end. I used this in my class a couple of times. Low carbon's the new fat-free, and this kind of, if you ever had kids, grandkids, my bacon's greener than your bacon. That's my proposal versus Kenwood's. What we'd like to do, I guess, is now Isaac can take a turn.
Well, yeah, I thought maybe we take a couple minutes if people had questions.
Oh, yeah,
Isaac
sure.
Isaac set up. Isaac is here, and he's going to go into the...
However you want to do it. You want to go first and then take them?
We should do questions together.
Yeah, do them together? Yeah, I think so. That's what we did it last time. It worked very well. So if you've got questions, please write them down, and we will entertain them. I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Thank you for... there it is. There's my presentation. How about that?
Anybody want cards for questions?
Yes.
Cards for questions. I'll get you a pen. Cards for
Hey
questions.
everybody, how's it going? How are we all feeling? Encouraged, happy, discouraged? Discouraged. Okay. Hopefully I can end this on a positive note. So my name's Isaac. I've been organizing for about 15 years in the environmental world. I am part-time staff with a small organization called Frack Action. It's 3.5 people. I'm the half. And so what I'm going to talk about is so who is here for part 1? Raise your hand. Okay. There is a whole bunch of new political information. There are a lot of updates to give, which is great. I do have new content here. So that's good. So we'll breeze through what I spoke about last month, and we'll talk about the new stuff in more depth. So we talked about this last month. Right now there are 39 proposed data centers in the state of New York. It would double the electrical usage in our state. That's insane. Okay, yep, so we had this map that is, Oliver found a much better map, but this is, that's Albany's, and this is a good picture because it shows where things all are relative in scale. So updated political context. In New York, we passed a one-year moratorium bill through the legislature. Sorry, weakened, I'm gonna use the, okay, there we go. The buttons are too tactile for my squirrel brain at the moment. So the fact that we got a year moratorium through the legislature, weakened from 3, is still an accomplishment. That politically pushed the governor to sign her executive order. She made a political calculation doing that to try to get the good press from this proposal and get ahead of the bad. So in the state of Maine, the legislature passed a moratorium. Governor took a ton of political heat. By putting through her own weaker executive order, she gets to control the press narrative. Does that make sense? Yep. So it's smart politics. I mean, and we'll talk more about our governor in just a couple slides. It is a weak one-year moratorium. The theory, and we can talk a little bit more about this in Q&A, is that it likely is not going to affect the Kenwood proposal. The bill that the legislature passed is still in play, which is good. So that one-year moratorium bill that we were able to get through that's much stronger than the executive order is still in play. That's a thumbs up. That's good. The deadline for the governor to sign a bill into law is midnight on December 31st. So how New York moves forward, as is at this moment on July 20-something. There you go. It's likely that we will see regulations from the governor. She said this at her State of the State address. It takes place early January. She talks about all her accomplishments. We will likely see the direction that she wants to go should we not get the stronger moratorium bill signed into law before then, if that makes sense. So we'll see kind of the direction that she is angling early next year. Specifically, New York State has environmental impact statements. She is committed to releasing an environmental impact statement specific to data centers. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. What it comes down to is the meat and potatoes and the small text that's going to impact actually how strongly these things are regulated. Left a whole slide of this. So she gets to declare victory with this press conference saying, look at this amazing thing I did. I'm the first governor in the state to do it. And put forth this absolutely pathetic press conference, truly. So it's, I mean, basically saying, well, you know, we don't really, data centers are going to be great for our communities. We're going to, as Skip said, we're going to talk about exactly how communities can navigate the benefits of data centers. Because they're going to be great for everyone. And you know what, and this is another new piece of information, she's proposed a small nuclear reactor with every data center. How do we feel about that? It is, it's an insane time to be alive. We went over this last month. Very simply, the governor has not been an ally on climate. She's pushing nuclear very hard, approving these pipelines, and is setting our grid up for not success. I'm not going to read every point here. This will be available. A couple positive, we do have some positive things that are good. Is Tom here with the town? He is not. Town of Bethlehem passed an effective ban on data centers. Thanks to your gift in absentia. Tom sure is the gentleman's name. He's a town board member. He was here last month. He's awesome. He's ideologically here, gets it, and wants to protect the town. The town of Guilderland is considering a ban as well. They're meeting in September. This is great. This is phenomenal news.
East Greenbush just passed one.
East Greenbush just passed one. This is all excellent. Like, there is a ton of local power, people getting engaged on the local level, board members respecting their constituents and making concrete moves to protect us from this industry that does not care about us and is looking to socialize the costs and reap all the benefits for their billionaire CEOs. The City of Albany, and this is a big one too, and this contributes to Kenwood. There's another, see, I told you I was going to try to go hopeful here. Albany Common Council passed a non-binding resolution, but a resolution saying we support the moratorium bill. So this is before the governor's executive order. We support the moratorium bill. This is the decision-making body through which the process is going to go through to approve or disapprove Kenwood. So I get to talk about environmental racism today, and I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here because we've learned more in the last couple months also. So essentially there is a long history of ugly polluting facilities being sited in low-income and majority black communities, leaving these communities to burden the burden of the challenges. Health impacts are huge. Health impacts are disproportionate in this country specifically. Specifically in the South End, this facility is an eighth of a mile from Ezra Prentice Homes. Ezra Prentice has dealt with environmental racism in the past with the bomb trades in the South End. Who here is familiar with that? Okay, that's great. A lot of people are. I'm happy to hear that. It's policy decisions that lead to these things being cited in these places. This company, and one interesting thing, so we're going to talk about the developers. Who here has heard of Basil Sagos? As a couple, these are the political folks. Basil Sagos was former head of DEC, did a lot of good. To his credit, did a lot of good. His firm has been brought on by the folks who are proposing the Kenwood project. That concerns me because he's an incredibly smart, savvy guy. Their PR has been quite good, actually. Their company people have gotten up in front of community groups, and I've heard this is the way to frame it, and said, look, I know you guys are not really in favor of this project. I hope to bring you to a maybe at this meeting. That's effective. That's really smart PR. And at the same time, how do I not curse? They are adding another City of Albany to the grid. The entire City of Albany, they're adding another one to our utilities. We need to be consistent, respectful, and speak truth to power about this project, about the incredible, the devastating and widespread impacts that this project will have. So as far as process goes, the mayor, her planning board, and city council will all have to be will all have to want to move this proposal forward. The fact that the city council put out a resolution saying, hey, we don't want we want a one-year resolution, a one-year moratorium in the city or in the state of New York, is great. My belief, and this is after some political analysis, talking to people who know, and at the end of the day, look, this is going to be individuals in positions of power who decide the course of our community, right? The mayor has a background in public health. It's going to be public health messaging and cost messaging that we win this issue on. That's my humble belief. Skip alluded to some of this. There is not a zoning category for data centers. City council needs to create a zoning category for data centers that has to approve the whole council before this project even moves forward. One of the tactics that's been effective is people showing up at every single planning board meeting, city council meeting, saying we don't want this. There has not been an official proposal from Kenwood to the city as of this moment. It's coming imminently. We know that it's coming imminently. And that's why the city is that's why the company is trying to do all this legwork to get their ducks in a row. So it's like, here's the proposal, look at how great we are, we're going to save, we're going to save the city of Albany. I went over this last time, so the mayor's been non-committal. We don't know, I would love it if the mayor came out and said, look, I'm shooting this down. This is a horrible idea for all of our residents. We're not allowing it to move forward. The issue is that the city is in a massive budget deficit at the moment. That's a huge factor. And as a decision maker, that's something our mayor has to consider. And we need to consistently say, massive polluting data center in an impoverished environmental justice community is not the solution to this city's financial problems. So, and I get to talk about, I now get to talk about what lights a fire underneath me personally, having watched what human beings getting together, educating their neighbors, talking about this stuff, respectfully speaking truth to power. This is going to be a multi-year fight. I really believe it. And I think it's going to, the trajectory can look like a lot of things. Eventually what it's going to look like is the company, hopefully, fingers crossed, saying, we're not going to do this. This is not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And it's going to be on all of us in this room, with our allies in the South End, in the city of Albany, respectfully speaking truth to power and saying we don't want this. This is a horrible idea for our state. It's not the direction we need to go, and we're going to do everything to fight against it. Who here is a resident of City of Albany? Oh, okay. Who here knows who their council member is? Who here has a relationship with their council member? Who here is a council member? Okay. Figured it was worth a shot. There is absolutely a moment to be setting up meetings with your city council members, city common council members. I said this last time. Reach out, say, hey, there's this huge proposal. I have real concerns. There is, and so we're working on a coordinated effort as well, and it's all good. Any meeting that says, look, I have concerns. These are why, and what speaks to elected officials is these are my concerns. This is in my day-to-day what I'm concerned about, be it affordability, be it the racial environmental justice element of it. The more you can speak from the heart, the better it is likely to be received. Who here has a relationship with the mayor? Okay.
Somewhat.
Yeah, we'll talk after this then. Because the key is it is getting the right people, talking to the right people. And so there's a political tool called power mapping, seeing who are the people who influence the decision makers, and working those angles and continuously doing it, continuously showing up to city council meetings. So at the end of the day, this is similar end to last month, and I'm going to say it again. It is always easier to stop a project before it goes in than after the fact. I don't think I shared this last month. I was living and working in Binghamton, New York against fracking for many years. In our county, there were 200,000 wells planned. 200,000, that's a well every square foot. That's you leave your house and you're hitting fracking rigs. We stopped it. It is easier. This is a moment in time before we have screwed our climate goals any worse than we already have, before these facilities start going out, getting built in New York. This is a political moment to stop these things before they go in. It is always easier to stop them now than later. And I will close with that. Really appreciate y'all. Looking forward to some good discussion and Q&A.
Question card. Anybody got a question? You guys want to look at the questions together here?
All right, I'm gonna help gather, and am I gonna give a bunch of feedback if I put this?
As opposed to just raise our hand.
He's got a hearing problem, so he won't be able to hear your question.
Well, we gather cards, yeah. I saw your hand first, sir.
Well, all of this is being driven by something. The question to me is, what's the money? What's the money that's driving this? Because obviously, whoever owns the data center is trying to make money. That must be it. And tons of it from the number that are being proposed across the country. And they're going to get money from somebody selling something to somebody.
The way that it works is this. The developers build them. Anthropic, AI, Meta, Google, a couple of other small players are out there selling these, what they call models, that allow you to run software that will do whatever you want it to do. Anything from a financial analyst job to an engineer's job, even an architect's job right now, are all out there being potentially taken over by these AI models. And so what they're doing is selling this service to many, many, many companies and corporations. I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember whether it's AI or Anthropic right now. Their first quarter earnings from their model are already almost $23 billion. First quarter earnings.
So what happens when the actual facility crashes and burns and is non-functional?
Oh, they got backups. I mean,
No. I mean, it's
They
gonna
do.
crash and burn. So it's going to be a big footprint on the landscape, just sitting.
well, yeah, if in fact, you know, they're kind of overbuilding. They're all racing to get there first. I mean, that's the game plan, you know. How fast can I build them? Get out of my way. I'm going to build these things. And this one, the Kenwood one, is rather small compared. Some of them are gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts. They're already building these in Texas and Virginia, Arizona, etc. These mammoth plants.
And they built those without, like, the public input.
Oh yeah, the Utah one where the what's his face?
So we're really.
He went out there and he bought, I don't know, 10,000 acres or whatever the heck it was, and he wants to build this. He wants to build one that's going to take more power in the entire state of Utah. And he did it without any public input in terms of getting the approvals. Well, that flew in his face. All of a sudden, the state senator and the governor are like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, they're getting too much heat. So they said, well, cut it in half. And then all of a sudden, it was, well, make it 25% of what you proposed. And it's like, so they're getting beaten up really badly. But he's just like, they want to build these things because there's potentially so much profit in selling these AI models to all these corporations. Example, my son works for Salesforce, which is a major data company. He was asked to start using AI. He wasn't asked, he was told. You're told, do it. And so he took the task on, and his staff that worked for him were trying to work out this workabout to this legacy software stuff and kind of update it. And it was, you know, they were all complaining, man, it's just, we're working, it's taken us weeks to do this. Well, he sat down in 8 hours with AI and wrote this game plan and then reiterated it a couple times, handed it off to his people after he personally tested with one of the processes. Instead of 2 weeks worth of work, they got it done in 9 hours. That's what's going on with AI right now. It's improving all this workflow. The concern that's out there by the people that do it is they're going to lose their jobs. The people that own this, you know, Sam Altman and them, oh, we're going to make it so wonderful you won't even have to work. There's going to be so much profit. We'll just make you shareholders. I don't know. I don't believe it. There's trouble brewing in the rate that they're building. Right now, there's so much pushback on them all over the country right now. Something like 130 projects have been postponed because of public input, where they've been able to get it.
Okay, so we have a few each. This is great. Anyone else have cards that they want to hand our way? Okay, this is perfect. All right, so I am going to take a simple one. What about the Kenwood project makes it likely not covered by the governor's executive order? She specifically exempts AI data centers that serve hospitals. That's the one. And universities, and they're claiming to do both. So that's specifically what that's the answer to the question.
And part of it is that if they build 49 megawatts, they're exempt. You start with 49 and then do 180 after the moratorium goes away.
Okay, I'm going to take another one that I'm going to hand off to you for more information. For more, if you know more. Will data centers facilitate? It's been a long day. And I do know the English language. Will data centers facilitate domestic surveillance? Yep. Yep. Who here is familiar with Flock, F-L-O-C-K? Who here is not familiar with Flock? Okay, this is a good thing to talk about. So you might have seen them in particularly like Walmart parking lots. It's cameras. Camera arrays, essentially. This is an ordinary, closed loop kind of surveillance to prevent me from stealing avocados. There are a few corporations who are tracking everything, license plate number, our shopping habits, and a lot of that is, what is powering that is facial recognition, and it's all, AI is absolutely underscoring all parts of the build out of Flock cameras. Flock stands for something, I don't entirely know what. But ugly, and it's resulting in corporations having absurd amounts of our information, being able to predict what we want to buy before we want to buy it, being able to predict where we're going to go today because they have all of our travel patterns saved. It is an insane amount of information. It is an insane thing that these things just kind of went up, and when you start to look...
We don't have say in it.
What's that?
We don't have say.
No, but so in the city of Troy right now, there's a group fighting against Flock cameras. So
But they're pushing their agenda on
Yes.
us.
it is up to decision makers to say, we don't want to contract with these people because surveilling our citizens is wrong.
Do we know where these cameras are?
Everywhere.
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 And, all you have to do is look up. They're there. They're everywhere.
You see one?
The library, grocery stores, street corners, Walmarts, you name it. There's a couple things here. I'll quickly go on. One of them is a good question. Why are they being proposed to the Arctic in northern Canada? Well, somebody talked about it. But where do you get gigawatts of power in the Arctic? It isn't there. Unless you're going to build a nuclear reactor up there.
And you'd be heating it. The icebergs would
And the next one, this was the point that I probably didn't touch on it, but in terms of using the closed loop cooling, you use more chillers to make all this cold water. And in fact, the refrigerants that are there have this high global warming potential. So yes, it is a concern. There are rules out there about how you treat all those refrigerants, but as they say, accidents happen. And I witnessed one of those one time years ago. So yeah, it is an issue. And the more, and the issue is this, so they got to put them in the chillers. But let's go back upstream where they got to make all that stuff. That's where the problem is. Dow and a couple of other companies that make those refrigerants, they have incidents at the plants.
Do you know, that was my question. Do you know what refrigerants they're using now? Because there's a step down.
They've been using 134A. There's a couple of new ones that are coming out. I don't have them off the top of my head. There's like 5 new ones. And the new ones are more efficient in terms of electricity in the chiller, slightly more efficient, but they have higher GWPs or global warming potentials that are associated with them.
Yeah, if they are HFOs, so the older stuff is HFCs now that we are moved away from the ozone depleting stuff. Now they're creating HFOs. Really natural refrigerants is what we should be using, but the HFOs, they have an additional issue that they degrade into TFA, which is a short chain PFAS.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's a PFAS plus a global warming potential issue, unless they're using ammonia, say, or something.
there's ammonia. Water is a refrigerant.
Right,
Believe it or
but
not, if you use
CO2
in an absorption chiller, which would be a novel. I hate to tell those guys over at Kenwood this idea, but they could use all that waste heat and run them through an absorption chiller and make cold water. But they're really expensive and they're kind of a maintenance headache. I've done them. They work. but not a lot of people want to use them. A lot of them are made in Japan now, but they're out there. You could do that. It would be a novel idea, but I don't even want to build it, aren't I?
For all the reasons.
Okay, yeah, we're doing great here. Okay.
Good question.
This is a good one. Mayor Appleers was huge in fighting the bomb trains. Might be a way to make sure she fights this. Thoughts? And get Doug Bullock involved. That's yours, Mary. Who here knows and loves Doug Bullock?
I do.
You know, I'll tell you, to be able to drop a name in a room and have love in your absence, that's pretty great. Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure out the political analysis on our mayor.
She was the city council person
Yes.
for the South End at
Oh.
the time of the bomb threats.
Interesting. Okay.
So if she wasn't, then she was being deemed to be it. She was really active. I was involved with that.
Yeah, so Mary is saying she was active.
She spoke a lot.
Yeah, which is great. And as mayor, the pressures that you were under are different. We're trying to get a strong, and do you want to write down what you have? Because you have too many thoughts that are too in-depth to.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say
hold on.
something in connection with
Nope,
that.
just
yeah.
1 second. Just write it down so we can keep us focused here. We're trying to do good political analysis on the mayor. That's great information, and I think it's going to be key to make the case that this is incredibly harmful for the community. And her background is in public health. We need to make the public health angle. There is absolutely a world where she publicly says, I've looked at the public health impacts of this facility and I'm not comfortable with it in my city. That's what I would love to see. And there's a world where that absolutely happens.
Climate change projections in New York State is going to get hotter. Absolutely. I've been talking about this in the classes that I taught with the students, and when we talk about designing buildings for the future, you want to use the data that goes back from weather data that goes back 10, 20 years, and that's kind of what we've used as engineers and architects for a long time. But with the climate shifting the way it is, I've been telling architects and engineers they need to be looking at the climate that exists in places like North Carolina and Virginia, because that's what the climate models of the future are telling us what it's going to be like. It's going to be more hot days, more humid days here in the Northeast over time.
Simple. And so this is the last one, and then we can kind of have, if we need to be out by 8:45. Okay. So we'll have a little bit, we can have some conversation. Thank you to whoever put this down. The next Albany Common Council meeting is Thursday, July 30th. Who put that down? Thank you for that. Who here can commit to be at that meeting? The 30th. The next Common Council meeting is July 30th.
Specifically for the data centers, that's what it was.
I did not see
That's what
that.
I got.
Thank you for being on top. That's great. We need a big showing of people would be great. That's going to be at City Hall right on Eagle Street there. So thank you for that. That's great. Yes, go to that meeting. July 30th. July 30th, 6:30.
Okay, last one I've got, two-parter. What do temperature increases due to global warming look like across the global majority? Well, it's variable. A good part of the U.S., a good part of Southeast Asia will see increased temperatures according to most of the global warming models that I have seen. The one place that may not is England, because the global warming is associated with this North Atlantic oscillating current that comes up across from the south. And that current is actually projecting in the models, and actually the real data is showing that it's cooling. So it may get colder there in the one place on this planet that in fact it'll be different. And the last question is with that, what are the drivers for consumers pushing the increases in the construction of the data centers? Well, It goes all back to selling these AI models and these, what they call agents. They're using this terminology that kind of like doesn't make any sense. But agents are like these models that act like people and do the work for you. That's what an agent is when we talk about AI. And an agent can be a financial analyst, it can be a sales representative, it could be a multitude of things where that job could be taken over by computer model somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world. And those are the kind of things that the models do, in addition to the thing I told you about, like software reprogramming and coding. Coding is a big one. So anybody here that's ever done computer programming work, you know, it's tedious work. I kind of did that for a little while very early in my career and decided this is not what I want to do. But there's a lot of people out there writing code, designing websites, and all that kind of IT work. These agents will be doing all that work as we go forward. So the websites that you'll look at will have never been designed by a human being. You call up a customer service representative, it'll sound like a person. It'll like your GPS person. Turn left at the next light, please. That's all that, all right? All of that will be AI. It already is in some ways. You know, for years we've all been looking and say, well, I'm going to Google that. You know what that is? That was the early versions of AI.
Who here has interacted with an AI, called their phone company or whatever and gotten, who here has not interacted with AI on the phone? Okay, got a good couple. It's a thing though. So we have gone through the paper questions. I didn't mean to be rude. Does anyone else have any, raise your hand and we'll try to get to.
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes.
Okay. 1, 2, Mary, you want 3?
I'm just wondering.
1, 2, 3. Yep.
Not that I want the data center, but are any of these places looking into geothermal to do the cooling, to keep the buildings at a certain
I'm going to repeat that. Are any of the companies looking at geothermal to cool their data centers?
When you need 60 megawatts of cooling, when you need 60 megawatts of cooling, that's like a billion BTUs. It's a huge number. And the interesting thing is that there's been some conversations out there, this kind of fringe design stuff that some of us have been reviewing. And when you look at geothermal, do you want to put all that heat into the ground? Maybe. What's going to happen? What kind of soil conditions are there? Is all that heat going to create something that can be not without its own set of consequences? We don't know. Or, on the other hand, extracting that, from a geothermal perspective, I mean, you could go to places in Scandinavia, like Iceland. I forgot the name, something like 90% of their electricity is coming from geothermal. It's a wonderful thing. It is so wonderful, and this has been ongoing for a long time, that the aluminum manufacturing companies, the people that mine this bauxite ore, you know where they send it? They send it to Iceland because the electricity is so cheap there to refine it into aluminum ingots, and then they send it all over the world. That started about 10 years ago with their geothermal electricity production. So there's some really, areas of the world where interesting things happen. Should we move all of our data centers to Iceland? Well, it's kind of a cold climate, so you could reject the heat, or they could heat the houses, but there aren't that many people there. There aren't that many buildings, I think, to absorb that much heat that we might need.
So 1, 2, 3.
New York State is projected to get wetter, and because of the water usage, could this potentially mean we get a lot of data centers? Because we're okay with water when so many states simply haven't got enough.
It's a finite planet. There is only so much resource that we have. And how do you wish to use it? What would be the better good? Is when I start to ask questions, what's the better good for using any specific resource, whether it's electricity. And as the planet warms in many of these locations, there's more air conditioning being used all the time, which means more refrigerants are being used. And in some of these cases, the refrigerants being used overseas are not the ones that we would allow here in the U.S. There's this kind of contraband refrigerant market out there right now for these cheap window units and smaller AC systems. And they leak because they're not well installed. I mean, there's all kinds of complications going on with a lot of this stuff. I have a slide that I use in another presentation that shows a building in Taiwan, and it's like 10 stories tall, and every one of those windows has a window air conditioning in it now, when it did not used to have that. So as the world warms, we buy more air conditioning. If you don't think that's the case, the last heat wave, if you logged in Lowe's, there were pallet loads of air conditioners sitting in there, and now they're not there. They all bought them. They're out there in the world waiting to leak, using electricity when we need them.
Yeah, it does like come out when you say, what would be the greater good, but wherever it happens to the society, the greater good is not taken into account at all. It's more about profit. The greater good for SSE would be to moderate crop growth so that we could grow more food. And the capitalism is an interesting law.
Yeah. What was the other question? One more person?
I don't have a question, but I'm from Mount Hope Neighborhood Association.
I'd love to hear you.
I don't have a question, but I'm from the Mount Hope Neighborhood Association, and that meeting for the walkthrough, we did not find out about it until late. The other thing is, they never notified the neighborhood association about their plans. I got wind of it via email from the Urban League. So yes, they are trying to sell it. They said it's going to be only on 1 acre, two subfloors, and then I think 2 or 3 on the top. And someone asked them, well, you can't, they're due to, I guess, the place of Kenwood, you can only build in certain areas.
Yeah.
So he never answered the question about going up. So I know the Common Council, and our Common Council member, from what I understand, I wasn't at the meeting, he abstained on the vote, but he told me on the phone earlier today what happened. So he says he's still against it, and he plans on representing the neighborhood. And it's good to know that current mayor, I did not know her, what her background in education was, but that's good to know. I'm not part of her inner circle, but I do have, I can reach her pretty much at any time. And thank you for your support.
And what was your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Pat Perry.
Pat Perry. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I wouldn't mind, I actually would like to respond. Yeah. So just to mention, one tactic that the company used was to, there's who here is familiar with Reimagine Albany? A key group of organizations, and so the company is lobbying this group of community works to try to bring them, at least try to make their opposition quiet. So one tactic that we just agreed on today, we're going to write basically a joint letter saying, as community organizations in the City of Albany, we oppose the data center for these reasons. Getting neighborhood associations is absolutely critical. Getting the groups in Reimagine Albany, who here is in a decision-making body for a group in Reimagine Albany? Long shot, but it was worth a try. There will be a letter that circulates as far and wide as we can. And the idea is, so, the political battle is that it's a battle for the center. It's a battle for the middle. Like, they want to say, this is just the rational, normal thing to do. This is just development. It's okay, don't worry about it. Just 1 second. We need to say, this is not normal. This is an insane proposal. This is a dumb, dangerous idea. It's going to screw us all financially, in our wallets, in our health. In the fracking fight, the battle for the center looked like what wound up winning is this process poisons water, poisons air, and makes people sick. And it does, that's a reality. And noise pollution. So we are fighting for the center. We need to get these community groups in, move them from passive opposition to active opposition.
So I'm not
So
sure.
let's
We got a time check here. We gotta be out of this room in 7 minutes, okay?
Okay.
So we got time for maybe each of the speakers can have.
Okay, I see Ann, so raise your hand if you have one more thing. Okay, Ann, and then, Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people know, I came late, so you might have mentioned this, but the CANA meeting on August 5th, the Kenwood developers are going to be presenting there.
Okay, that's another good date, August 5th at City Hall.
August 5th, that's at 6:30, and it's over at the Livingston Avenue, like the West Hill, Arbor Hill, West Hill Community Center, the new one
The
on
new one?
Livingston Avenue. I went there first accidentally, because I thought this was, I got my thing
Libraries,
mixed up, yeah.
too many good libraries here, we're lucky.
That's not a library, it's
Oh, okay.
it's a community center, yeah.
Got it. Last word?
I just had just a comment. So I went to, went to those community gatherings at the College of St. Rose. And it's, on the surface, it seemed like everything was, up and up. But I really don't know how much the community, what was given to them, will be actually done. I mean, we already know that the proposing very well. But I'm just saying, we have to be very, diligent and forceful in saying, now, if you really provide, if you're allowing us to speak, will you really listen to our?
So there are a couple things there. So the company is strong on very benign sounding lies. And that's the dangerous thing, that the lies are not like so egregious, like when Trump opens his mouth, we know that it's garbage coming out. These guys are slick. They're really slick. And I mean, I am deeply concerned that they have very smart people advising them. So yeah, I mean, I said this in my presentation, it's respectfully speaking the truth, saying, look, this is a city of Albany's worth of electricity. That's reality. Say whatever you want. It's a city of Albany's worth of electricity you're adding to the grid. No one's benefiting but a couple wealthy people. So with that, I'll get last word here. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just don't see why they can use drinking water, which comes from reservoirs through the city proper. There's a Hudson River down there.
Why drinking water?
And they can at least take that out and send it back warm, which wouldn't be as bad.
Very quickly,
Drinking water.
the likelihood, they have to get this 180 megawatts from somewhere. I'm kind of familiar with the generating grid. And there's a plant called the Bethlehem Energy Center. It's down on Route 144 at the Hudson River. It currently produces something like, on average, 600 megawatts. It's capable of 900. So they could buy the power from them. That water does come from the Hudson River. And it goes up and then it gets evaporated into the atmosphere and makes everything a little more humid, a little more warmer. So it's kind of that secondary effect. So it's not drinking water if they choose to get it from them. If they choose to get it from the Selkirk Cogen plant, well, they're going to use Bethlehem water, which is why Bethlehem, we don't want a data center, but even though the data center's not there, we would have an impact on our water supply system.
Okay, we're gonna get thrown out of here. We're not out of this room.
Thank you.
For coming.
Thank you, everybody.